Okay, so they make the following conclusion. We're nearly to the end here. Testable predictions. Number 1, physiological arousal and any associated somatic anxiety. So, somatic anxiety is the physiological arousal. So, any associated somatic anxiety is not necessarily detrimental to performance. However, it will be associated with catastrophic effects when cognitive anxiety is high. So, someone who has a lot of physiological anxiety, it might not be detrimental to performance, might not matter, but if you are also very cognitively anxious, then that can have a catastrophic effect. Under conditions, so to clarify that, under conditions of high cognitive anxiety, hysteresis will occur. That means that performance goes off in a different direction to what you would expect, especially compared to that inverted U from Yerkes. So hysteresis will occur. Performance will follow a different path as physiological arousal increases compared to the path it would have taken as physiological arousal decreases. So depending on your physiological arousal, if you've got cognitive anxiety, then your performance is going to go in different conditions. Under conditions of low anxiety, hysteresis will not occur. So it's only if you've got high cognitive anxiety that this effect's going to happen. So we deviate from the normal path of what we'd expect. And to clarify what that means, i.e., it's predicted that there will be a negative correlation between performance and cognitive anxiety when physiological arousal is high, but when physiological arousal is low, there'll be a positive correlation. So, little drawing that you can take down to remind you what that means. So I've separated this out, a positive correlation, a negative correlation for low physiological arousal compared to high physiological arousal. Okay, so we've got cognitive arousal on one side, so how much cognitive stress is put on you, whether that's because you suddenly you're thinking about the fact that you've got to impress your girlfriend who's watching, or you've got to impress the whole of the British public because the BBC's switched on, or whether it's because you've got an awful lot to think about in that particular sport on that particular day. This is the level of cognitive arousal, so we can place different sports people at different points on here. And then this is their measure of performance. How many did they score, or how well did they play? So same for both graphs. But we've got people under low physiological arousal and high physiological arousal. So how pumped are they? Really pumped or not so much? So some examples. This guy has lost a race. Let's say this was his last race and he's running in the 100 metres and then he's running in the relay later that evening. Now, his cognitive arousal is very low, right? He is depressed. Okay, he really cared about the 100 metres. He wasn't bothered about the big race. So his cognitive arousal is too low. He's not thinking about much other than wanting to go home. His performance, therefore, is very low. He isn't physiologically aroused. He isn't approaching that race with his heart thumping and his veins bursting with excitement, right? But he is both cognitively too under-relaxed and he is too physically under-relaxed. Under-relaxed? That's the opposite of relaxed. Let's go with relaxed. He's too cognitively relaxed and he's too physically relaxed, which results in a low performance. Doesn't do well, lets his relay team down. Rory McIlroy playing his golf on a normal day. Golf requires quite a lot of thought. Which club are you going to use? Where are you going to put it? What's the wind doing? There's lots of people watching. You've got time to think about your shot. So lots of cognitive arousal for most golfers. But physiological arousal is pretty low. You'd hardly break a sweat. So it's not a particularly physically exertive sport. And for most of the course, let's say, right, for the 3 hours he's out on the course, the first 3 hours, he's cool as a cucumber. He's wandering around, playing his golf, but he's doing a lot of thinking. So performance is high. However, he's winning. And he could win the Masters, the most prestigious title Suddenly, on the last hole, he starts experiencing high physiological arousal. His heart rate goes through the roof, his palms get sweaty, he starts feeling dizzy, he suddenly realises what on earth is happening to him. He could win. So his body goes through the roof. His cognitive arousal is still very high because it needs to be very high, but it results in a low performance. This is what Fazey and Hardy are suggesting, is that's that catastrophic effect to performance on that final hole. Rory's performance plummets, and it's because he's thinking too much, but he's also got the physiological arousal with it. It's almost like the system's gone into overload physically and mentally, resulting in low performance. Compared to someone who always wins, Lewis Hamilton, his physiological arousal is very high because they sit in that car for a long time and their body is under immense stress, lots of G-forces, and they sweat buckets. So lots of physiological arousal. But he manages to keep cool cognitively, gets in the zone, doesn't think about too much, clears his head. So he had low cognitive arousal, high physiological arousal, so his performance is good. It's up the x-axis there, it's right up there. So that's what they mean when they say there is this different, they put it as, how do they put it? Let's find it. Under conditions where hysteresis will occur, so performance follows a different path as physiological arousal increases from the path it would if it was decreasing. So your low cognitive arousal doesn't impact unless you are also in a high physiological arousal state, in which case you get the drop-off. And if you're Rory McIlroy, that's where it can be detrimental. The drop-off in performance, boom. As you're thinking too much, I think I just said low cognitive arousal, sorry, I obviously meant high. Thinking too much cognitive arousal in a high physiological arousal state. So that catastrophic effect happens when you have both high physiological and high cognitive, okay, resulting in poor performance. So their overall conclusions, they're saying that the inverted U of Yerkes Dodson is flawed. The real catastrophe would be for sports psychology to remain tied to the inverted U hypothesis as the only plausible model of stress-performance relationship. So they're being quite damning there. They're saying, it would be a catastrophe for psychology for us to keep banging on about the inverted U hypothesis. Catastrophe models of motor performance under anxiety can be applied to describe the relative contributions to performance of cognitive anxiety. So, on the day, physiological arousal, task difficulty, and self-confidence. So, on the day changes. So, they're saying we can apply it to understand why on the day things that happen with your cognition and your physiological arousal suddenly can produce these really weird effects where Rory McIlroy has an absolute meltdown. The inverted U hypothesis is not the only plausible model. So again, they're saying it's not just about the inverted U with stress performance. And the relationship between stress and performance can be explained through the application of a catastrophe model. So they're suggesting their own model there. Okay, so remember, back to the start of this, they're criticising the previous research and then they're saying, what about the catastrophe model? That might be better. AO3 evaluation, I would suggest, by the way, that you do use those examples so when you look back at your notes around the exam, you know what's going on. It is a challenging study. But if we're criticising the research, then while it's possible to, thanks to technology, unobtrusive portable polygraph machines to measure physiological arousal in the lab, it's not very easy when they're performing, especially cognitive anxiety. So it's not clear what point cognitive anxiety arousal interact. They're saying that as a model. They're suggesting this is a model, but you can't. It's not easy to measure cognitive arousal in the middle of a football final or in the middle of a Tour de France final race. You know, you've got to ask someone a questionnaire of how they're feeling. So It is still theoretical, this model, and lacking some experimental detail. Okay, there's the kind of exam questions you get. Using the research by Fazey and Hardy, explain the role of arousal and anxiety in sport. So you want to use some of that background. So mark schemes, 5 marks for knowledge and understanding of the study and 5 marks for application. That doesn't mean that you're only talking for 5 marks about the study. You're picking the bits out of the study and applying it to understanding the role of arousal and anxiety in sport. Okay, how do details of the study, what are they saying about the role of anxiety in sport? What are they saying about when performance will drop off? So really you're using their model that's in the study details, the catastrophe model, to explain what might happen in those different examples that was given. Okay, have a look at the plan there. Have a go at it, and you'll be well prepared for it. Thanks for listening.